Hello my dear students, myself Amit Upadhyay and again I am back with English. So today we will be learning our first unit, Humour. So what is humour? Humour is nothing but anything which makes us to laugh. Anything which is very funny, that is called humour. So everybody wants to laugh on things which makes you happy. So it is a very important part of our life and everybody loves to enjoy humor. So your book has a picture of a monkey looking in the mirror. You might be wondering that what monkey might be looking into the mirror. The same question, if it is imposed to you, what will be your answer? Why do we look at the mirror? The answer is very simple. In order to look at our face, in order to admire the beauty of our face, that is the purpose of looking into the mirror. Now, there might be chances that the monkey might have admired of his own beauty. Sounds quite funny, na? Yes. The next question is, what could be the monkey thinking at this point? If the monkey would have been as a human being, he must be thinking of doing some kind of makeup on his face. He might be looking towards applying some more beauty stuff on his face in order to look more beautiful. These might be thoughts maybe coming to the brain of the monkey. So this was our pre-reading stuff. Now let's just get into the chapter. What is the name of our first part of the unit? The first part is the snake and the mirror. As the name suggests, this is the story of a snake looking into the mirror, and what happens further, we will look into the further reading and explanation of the chapter. Now I am reading the chapter for you, and with that I will be explaining the incidences that have happened within the lesson. Excited? Let's start. The snake and the mirror. Has a snake ever coiled itself round any part of your body? A full-blooded cobra. All of us fell silent. The question came from the homeopath. The topic came up when we were discussing snakes. We listened attentively as the doctor continued with the tale. So, this is the discussion going on between the people sitting together, and this incident has been told by a homeopath doctor who is practicing his doctorate and encountered with a snake, and he continues to tell the story. This is how the story begins. It was a hot summer night about 10 o'clock. I had my meal at the restaurant and returned to my room. I heard a noise from above as I opened the door. The sound was a familiar one. One could say that rats and I shared the room. I took out my box of matches and lighted the kerosene lamp on the table. This paragraph tells us about a homeopath doctor as he returns from the practice after taking his food from the restaurant, and as soon as he opens the door of his house, he hears a noise which is quite familiar to him. As he tells that so many rats walk around in his room, so literally we can say that rats were the companion to the doctor for that night. He opens the door and lights up the lamp. Now let us see what further happens in the story. The house was not electrified. It was a small rented room. I had just set up a medical practice and my earnings were meager. Word meager means very less. I had about 60 rupees in my suitcase, along with some shirts and dhotis. I also possessed one solitary black coat which I was then wearing. Now, the narrator of the story explains how and what kind of situation in which he used to live. So, he had a small hut in which he used to live, which was not electrified, and it was a rented room. He has just started his medical practice, so he had very little money to earn. He had 60 rupees in his suitcase and he had some shirts and dhotis in his suitcase. At the same time, he was wearing a black coat, which was a sign that he is a practicing doctor. Let's moving up to the next paragraph. It says, I took off my black coat, white shirt and not so white vest and hung them up. So what does he do? He had taken off his clothes and placed them where he wanted to. And I opened the two windows in the room. It was an outer room with one wall facing the open yard. It had a tiled roof with long supporting gables that rested on the beam over the wall. There was no ceiling. There was a regular traffic of rats to and from the beam. I made my bed, pulled it close to the wall. I lay down, but I could not sleep. I got up and went out to the veranda for a little air, but the wind god seemed to have taken time off. Now, the narrator is explaining his situation, what kind of room it was. So, its window was attached to a veranda and it had a tiled roof supported by the beam through which traffic of rats continuously used to come in and out throughout his room. Tiled roof house means the kind of houses that we usually see in the rural areas, in the villages. In the modern type houses, we don't have much use of tiles as we have lintered ceilings in modern kind of houses. So you can imagine that it is an old kind of house which had a continuous traffic of rats coming in and out. So now you can easily imagine and come to a conclusion that the sound that he has heard when he entered to the room might have been the sound made by the rats. Now let's move to the next paragraph. The author tried to sleep but he could not. What was the reason? What might be the reason? We'll get to know in the next paragraph. So without wasting any time, let's go to it. I went back into the room and sat down on the chair. So this is usually happens when you won't feel sleepy. So you just want to have a walk or you just want to sit and want to pass some little time so that when you feel sleepy you can again go to bed. So the same thing the narrator did. I opened the box beneath the table and took out a book. The Materia Medica. I opened it at the table on which stood the lamp and a large mirror. A small comb lay beside the mirror. Now what is the scene? Where is the narrator sitting? Narrator is sitting near a table and he is having a book named Materia Medica, which is related to the medical profession, and it has a big mirror in front of it and a comb kept on one side of the table. There is one lamp also on the table which is making everything visible in that particular scene. Now what happens next? One feels tempted to look into the mirror when it is near. I took a look. That's very obvious. Whenever you see a mirror, there is a great chance that you feel like looking yourself into it. That's a obvious and very natural feeling of a person. It is a tendency that we want to know how do we look. So in order to check it out, we desperately want to look into the mirror. And the same thing happened to the narrator over here. So continuing to the paragraph, I took a look. In those days, I was a great admirer of beauty and I believed in making myself look handsome. So over here now, the narrator changes his point of view and he says that in those days, I was a great admirer of beauty. In other words, he says that I used to love beauty. And at the same time, I wanted myself to look handsome, to look more attracting to the other people. So, I was unmarried and definitely was a doctor. So, if you are an unmarried person, you know the feeling of looking handsome. So, he was a doctor and at the same time he was an unmarried person. So, he thought that it is his right to look handsome. Next, he says that I felt I had to make my presence felt. I picked up the comb and ran it through my hair and adjusted the parting so that it looked straight and neat. Again, I heard that sound from above. Now what does he do? He holds the comb and he parted his hair into two parts. You might remember the old hairstyle having a straight opening in between the two part of the hair. If you have seen the old movies and all, you might know that. So the narrator combs his hair in that way, and while he was looking and while he was doing that, again he hears the same sound from above. Then what happens? I think you are really curious to know. Let us see what happens after that. I took a close look at my face in the mirror. I made an important decision. I would shave daily and grow a thin mustache to look more handsome. I was after all a bachelor and a doctor. So now while doing all these things, the narrator was thinking of doing some changes in his daily life and he wanted to look more handsome. So he decided that he would shave daily and he will put a thin mustache so that he will look a little more attractive, more charming and more handsome. So he made that decision. At the same time, what happens next? Let us see. I looked into the mirror and smiled. It was an attractive smile. I made another earth-shaking decision. I would always keep that attractive smile on my face to look more handsome. I was after all a bachelor and doctor too on top of it. So you might be seeing it that the phrase I was a bachelor and doctor, this phrase is frequently repeated in the paragraphs. Why? What does it mean? It means that the narrator is proud to be a doctor and a bachelor at the same time. That's why he is repeating all those things and he thinks that it is his right to look handsome. So that's why he is doing all those things. Now let us move further. Again came that noise from above. The same thing happened. He has heard that noise again. What happens next? I got up and lit a beedi. You know that beedi thing, a kind of cigar which is being smoked by the village people mostly in the rural parts of India. Next, it says, and paced up and down the room. Then another lovely thought struck me. I would marry. I would get married to a woman doctor who had plenty of money and a good medical practice. She had to be fat for a valid reason. If I made some silly mistake and needed to run away, she would not be able to run after me and catch me. So here we got our humorous situation over here. So with the string of thoughts, again one thought came into his mind that what if I'll get married? So if I choose to marry also, I will be marrying a doctor who has plenty of money. He added that no matter if she is a doctor and she has a plenty of money, she should be really fat. Do you want to know the reason? The reason is, if he makes any mistake, she must not be able to catch him when he tries to run away from her. Quite funny, na? Yes. So this kind of random thoughts were coming to his mind. Next we will see what happens. With such thoughts in my mind, I resumed my seat in the chair in front of the table. There were no more sounds from above. Suddenly, there came a dull thud as if a rubber tube had fallen to the ground. Surely nothing to worry about. Even so, I thought I would turn around and take a look. No sooner had I turned than a fat snake wriggled over the back of the chair and landed on my shoulder. The snake's landing on me and my turning were simultaneous. Now what was the situation? After having such random thoughts and some funny humorous thing coming into his mind, again he has heard that sound. Then what he did? Again he sat on chair. There were no more such sound coming from above him. Suddenly he hears a third sound coming from the chair. So he was thinking that there might not be a thing to worry about, but suddenly he turns back to look at it and he finds that it was a snake fallen from above the roof to his chair. So the falling of the snake and the turning of the narrator was simultaneous. They turned towards each other at the same moment. So the story is turning to a very interesting path. Let us see what happened next. I didn't jump, I didn't tremble, I didn't cry out. There was no time to do any such thing. The snake slithered along my shoulder and coiled around my left arm above the elbow. The hood was spread out and its head was hardly 3 or 4 inches from my face. Now, the narrator is speaking about the horrific situation that he was going through. The snake was 3 to 4 meters away from his face as it coiled around his left arm. The narrator was unable to shout. He was unable to cry. He was unable to even move from that situation as he was very horrified and stunned at the situation. He didn't had even a single thought that what to do in such a situation. When we are surprised, we experience such kind of experiences with us. So let us see what happened after that. It would not be correct to say merely that I sat there holding my breath. I was turned to a stone, but my mind was very active. The door opened into darkness. The room was surrounded by darkness. In the light of lamp, I sat there like a stone image in the flesh. So, what he did, he had nothing to do. He was just stunned and surprised. He had a mixed feeling. He was very afraid in this situation. He did not have any idea what to do. So instead of doing anything, he stood there like a stone image, having a flesh and blood, like a statue. Let us see what he did further. I felt then the great presence of the creator of the world, that is nothing but the God, and the universe. God was there. Suppose I said something and he did not like it, I tried it in imagination to write in bright letters outside my little heart the words, "Oh God." So, in the situation of the trouble, every person remembers the great creator of the world, that is nothing but the God. The same situation was with the narrator. He could not help himself. So that's why he left everything to the God. He was feeling the presence of the God, and he was praying the God that, God, please give me strength, and I should not do anything that the snake might not like. Otherwise, the snake will bite him, and that bite may lead the narrator to the bed of death. So let us see what further he did. There was some pain in my left arm. It was as if a thick leaden rod, no, a rod made of molten fire, was slowly but powerfully crushing my arm. The arm was beginning to be drained of all strength. What could I do? At my slightest movement, the snake would strike me. Death lurked 4 inches away. Suppose it struck, what was the medicine I had to take? There were no medicines in the room. I was but a poor, foolish, and stupid doctor. I forgot my danger and smiled feebly at myself. So the situation was, the narrator was feeling like someone is hitting his left hand with a hot molten iron rod. It was so painful that the snake was coiling his hand so tightly, and if at all the narrator moves slightly from that position, the snake will bite him. And what if the snake has bitten him? He did not have any medicine with him. After all, he was a poor doctor. So instead of fearing of the situation, he smiled feebly, that is, very slowly on his situation. Now let us see what happens after that. It seemed as if God appreciated that. The snake turned its head, it looked into the mirror and saw its reflection. I do not claim that it was the first snake that had ever looked into a mirror, but it was certain that the snake was looking into the mirror. Was it admiring its own beauty? Was it trying to make an important decision about growing a mustache or using an eyeshadow or mascara or wearing a vermilion spot on its forehead? Now, the kind of thoughts the narrator was getting, they seemed to be quite funny. He forgot his all fear, and now some nonsense thoughts were coming to his mind, that what if the snake might be admired of his own beauty looking into the mirror? What if the snake has made a decision of growing a mustache or wearing an eye mascara or having a vermilion spot over his head? So the narrator was having the same thoughts as he had thought before this situation. Let us see what happened next. I did not know anything for certain. What sex was the snake? Was it male or female? I will never know. For the snake unwound itself from my arm and slowly slithered into my lap. From there, it crept into the table and moved towards the mirror. Perhaps it wanted to enjoy its reflection at closer quarters. So now, the narrator is wondering about the gender of the snake. It didn't know whether it was male or female. Meanwhile, what happened? The snake uncoiled the narrator from its left hand and slowly moved towards the mirror from the lap of the narrator. The narrator is wondering that maybe the snake is admired of his own beauty and want to enjoy his beauty from the closer distance apart from the mirror. Let us see what happened next. I was no more image cut in granite. I was suddenly a man of flesh and blood. Still holding my breath, I got up from the chair. I quietly went out through the door into the veranda. From there, I leaped into the yard and ran for all I was worth. So what happened? Earlier he was sitting like a stone, like a statue, but suddenly some energy came into him and he immediately stood up from that chair and ran away from the room with all the energy that he had. Next, few. Each of us heaved a sigh of relief. All of us lit beedies. Somebody asked, "Doctor, is your life very fat?" Sorry, wife. So here the story gets interrupted. Now one of his friends asks, lighting up a beedi, that, "Is your wife fat?" "No," the doctor said. "God willed otherwise. My life companion is a thin, ready person with the gift of a sprinter." He says that if God wills to give, he should give me a good wife, thin wife, who is a good runner. Sprinter means runner. Someone else asked, "Doctor, when you ran, did the snake follow you?" The doctor replied, "I ran and reached a friend's house. Immediately I smeared oil all over myself and took a bath. I changed into fresh clothes. The next morning at about 8:30, I took my friend and one or two others to my room to move my things from there. But we found that we had little to carry. Some thief had removed most of the things. The room had been cleaned out, but not really. The thief had left behind one thing as a final insult." So what happened? When he returned back to the friend's house, he has taken bath and he has returned back to the room so that he can shift the things. So what he found, that everything was being wiped out and the thing only was left was nothing but a old waste. So whose waste it was? It was the doctor's waste. The thieves might have thought that this is no how useful for them, and that's why they left it in the room as an insult. So this story was written by the author Vaikam Muhammad Bashir and translated by V. Abdullah. The writer is from Kerala and he is a prominent writer in the Malayali language. So this is the explanation of the chapter, The Snake and the Mirror. I hope you have understood the session. In the next session, we will be looking at the exercise, at the same time the glossary of the chapter. Meanwhile, stay home, stay safe.
Hi students, today we are going to discuss about matter around us. So what is matter? So our chapter is what? Matter around us. So it's a very familiar to us and very interesting topic. Today we are going to discuss about what are the properties of matter and what is matter, how matter is made of it, and what are the prehistoric things about the water matter. If everybody knows about matter is made of with what? Some tiny particles. Matter is made of with what? Some tiny particles. We can use that definition to defining the what simply as matter. So let's see the what the proper definition for matter. So anything in the world. So you can consider anything in the world. So that occupies space and also it has a water mass. The matter should occupy the water space as well as has mass also. So which thing having space occupies space as well as water having mass, that should consider known as water matter. For example, you can take any object, any substance in the universe. So that should be made up with water some tiny particles. You know, actually these matter. What does matter contain? So how matter is made up with particles. So about these description, many theories are there. Many scientists or many philosophers are given different types of descriptions or theories about the what matter. You know, the first who was proposed, the matter is made up with what? Tiny particles. You know, it's a very microscopic. So matter is made up with tiny particles. What are the tiny particles? Nothing but in our language we can treat them as a what? Atoms. Do you hear that word? Atom. So atom is a very familiar word. So every substance, if you consider anything, for example, this chalk piece. This chalk piece is made up with water, some tiny particles. Now I am considering this chalk piece as matter. So it's made up with water, some tiny particles. The tiny particles I am treating as a water matter here. Again the tiny particles. So we are name and no atoms. That atoms also made up with water, some microscopic particles. We can treat them as a water subatomic particles. What? Subatomic particles. Even that subatomic particles also made up with water, some quarks, nothing but we can treat them as a water quarks. So like we can dividing matter into what several levels, like a water atoms are made up with subatomic particles are made up with quarks. Even that atoms are together to making the water or making the what? Matter. So matter is nothing but which is occupies the water space as well as water mass, having the water mass. So that should be considered as a water matter. You know who was given this description first? You know, Democritus is a Greek philosopher. Actually the first Democritus what thought like matter is made up with some tiny particles. Matter is having some tiny particles. So but later officially we got that information. Officially we got the information from the what? Dalton, John Dalton. That is the first atomic theory. So now